exploring why so many adults struggled to get sleep, to get good sleep. According to the CDC, 1 in 3 adults isn't getting enough sleep. That's an extremely high ratio. And yet so many people are feeling exhausted all day. Something isn't adding up. Specifically, what we're doing in our day to day isn't conducive to allowing us that sleep either.
Yeah, and in your book, you describe hyperarousal, a state where the brain stays on high alert even at bedtime. For someone who feels tired all day but suddenly alert at night, can you explain what hyperarousal is and why it keeps the brain from settling down?
Absolutely. So there is this challenge that our brain maybe gets busy with all kinds of things throughout the day, going and working and taking care of our families and doing all the things that we need to do. And then when we settle down at night, it kind of goes, oh, great, now we've got time to work on X, Y, or Z. And so sometimes that's when all of the things that you maybe didn't have a chance to process or work through during the day comes up. For some people, especially the people who've been exposed to trauma, which is about 70% of the world, and then a smaller subset of those, maybe another 10% within that of 6 to 7% who have post-traumatic stress disorder, that time becomes a time where their avoidance strategies are no longer as effective, the things they've done to push away unwanted thoughts, memories, and emotions. And it all comes up kind of when we slow down, when we stop, when we rest. Regardless of whether there's trauma exposure there, this idea of hyperarousal, which sometimes we talk about as feeling tired but wired, comes up because there's this disconnect between the state that our body needs to be in to go to sleep, the state of relaxation, and this arousal, this wired feeling that's happening where the body is trying to address its sleep need, but our brain is just not winding down, it's not shutting down. In that state of hyperarousal, understandably keeps people from falling asleep, but it can also change the quality of that sleep throughout the night. And specifically, when it comes time for us to have dreams, it can make it more likely that people will have nightmares because the brain will pull imagery to match that state of anxiety or hyperarousal.
And so, can you talk a little bit about how hyperarousal connects with this other concept in the book of conditioned arousal, where people are actually conditioning their brain to become in that activated space. So, if you could just talk to us a bit about the connection between the two.
So, when we think about stages of alertness, of consciousness, we often think about this idea of being asleep or awake. And we have this biological drive to sleep. We also have what's called a circadian rhythm, which is our body's way of trying to keep us aligned with a roughly 24-hour Earth day. Most people want to be awake during the day and asleep at night. And those two things need to be in alignment for us to get the kind of rest that we need. And we can sometimes, though, power through, even though we've got this sleep drive built up that we're exhausted, this hyperarousal can power through. So, this idea of being really anxious, alert, and for some people on guard, depending on their past experiences, depending on their current sleep environment or current living situation, there may be reasons to be alert or on guard if you have concerns for safety in the home or outside of the home, assuming you are housed. And so, this idea of conditioned arousal comes from classical conditioning. Some of your listeners may remember Pavlov and Pavlov's dog and how things that occur together get linked. And so, for Pavlov and his dogs, it was the sound of the bell and the presentation of food meant that the dogs would start to salivate. And over time, they didn't even need to see the food, they would just hear the bell, and this biological process would happen. And so when everything is going right, we want our body to be conditioned to associate the bed and sleep. And so once we get in bed, our body knows that we are ready to go to sleep. We relax and we sleep for a period of time that meets our sleep need, and that's individualized. And then we get up and do it all over again. For people who are having trouble sleeping, they often do other things in the bed. Sometimes that's the first time that they're stopping in the day and they spend some time thinking or ruminating, chewing over worries or issues that have happened. For some people who've been struggling with insomnia and think, I'm not going to get to go to sleep here tonight, they may end up doing other things like reading or watching TV. Some people eat in bed or talk on the phone or, doom scroll, other things that happen. And over time, this connection of bed and sleep is not so strong. And so it's like there's this menu of choices when we lay down at night. Instead of I am laying down to go to sleep, my brain goes, okay, which of these 10 options am I going to do? And so it keeps people awake, even though they may be physically tired, even though their sleep drive might be high. There's this disconnect. And over time, they learn to associate the bed with being awake and sometimes being irritated because they're not sleeping, or worried or anxious or fearful because of those other pieces that have come to be associated with the sleep and the sleep environment.
I definitely relate to that. As you were speaking, I'm just like, yep, check that off the list, check that off the list. There's definitely room to be more, conscious about what you are doing in bed, and the idea that you are conditioning the activities. That is, it makes a lot of sense. It does.